The phone rang at exactly 9:23 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. I remember the time because I was sitting at my kitchen table, drinking coffee from the same mug Beverly used to make fun of, minus the one with the faded "World's Best Dad" that our daughter Joyce gave me 15 years ago. I almost didn't answer these days. Most calls are either scammers trying to sell me car warranties or telemarketers who think I need life insurance at 64. But something made me pick up. Mr. Carl Williams. The voice was professional, female, with that careful tone insurance people use when they're about to deliver news. Yeah, that's me. This is Judith Wright from Midwest Insurance Group. I'm calling about your late wife, Beverly Williams' account. We have some discrepancies in our records that need clarification. My stomach dropped. Beverly had been gone 8 years now. Cancer took her in 2016, but I was still making payments every month to cover what my brother Dale told me were outstanding medical bills. $800 a month, like clockwork, for 8 years straight. That's a lot of money when you're living on a factory pension and Social Security. What kind of discrepancies? I asked, gripping the phone tighter. Sir, according to our records, Mrs. Williams' account was settled in full within 90 days of her passing in 2016. All medical expenses were covered by her insurance policy. There were no outstanding balances transferred to the estate. The coffee mug slipped from my other hand and shattered on the kitchen floor. Brown liquid spread across the linoleum Beverly had picked out when we bought this house 30 years ago. The same kitchen where she used to hum while making Sunday morning pancakes. The same table where we'd sit every evening after work talking about our days. That's impossible, I said, staring at the broken pieces. My brother's been helping me pay off her bills for 8 years now. There was a pause. Sir, what bills exactly? I'm Carl Williams, by the way, 64 years old, retired from the Motorola plant, where I supervised the assembly line for 32 years. Lived in the same house in Des Moines my entire married life. Never thought I'd be telling this story, but here we are. After Beverly died, I was a complete mess. 35 years of marriage, and suddenly I'm eating frozen dinners and trying to figure out how to work the washing machine. I'd wake up at 5:30 a.m. out of habit, reach for her side of the bed, and remember all over again that she was gone. The silence in that house was deafening. My younger brother Dale Coleman showed up at the funeral, all concerned and helpful. He'd always been the one with the business sense in the family, or so I thought. While I was working steady at the plant, Dale was always chasing some new opportunity, some scheme that was going to make him rich. Real estate ventures that fell through, consulting businesses that never quite got off the ground, partnership deals that somehow always ended with the other guy disappearing. Carl, he said that day at the cemetery, putting his hand on my shoulder while dirt was still being thrown on Beverly's casket. We need to talk about her medical situation. There are some complications with the insurance claims. I wasn't in any condition to think clearly. The funeral had cost more than I expected, even with the life insurance money. The house felt too big and too quiet. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't focus on anything for more than a few minutes at a time. When Dale offered to help sort through the paperwork, it felt like a lifeline. 2 weeks later, he came to my house with a manila folder full of papers, sat right here at this same kitchen table and spread them out like he was dealing cards. The same table where Beverly and I had made every major decision of our marriage, buying the house, planning for retirement, choosing her cancer treatment options. The insurance company is giving us the runaround, he explained, pointing to what looked like official documents. They're claiming some of Beverly's treatments weren't pre-authorized. We're looking at about $48,000 in outstanding balances. $48,000. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Beverly and I had always been careful with money, lived within our means, saved what we could. But cancer doesn't care about your budget. Those last 6 months, with all the specialists and experimental treatments, I'd lost track of the bills. There were so many hospitals, doctors, labs, pharmacies. I'd trusted the insurance company to handle it all. Trusted Dale when he said he'd help me sort through everything. What am I supposed to do? I asked, looking at the papers but not really seeing them. The letterheads looked official enough, the numbers were staggering, and I was too overwhelmed to question anything. I don't have that kind of money sitting around. That's where I come in, Dale said, putting on his best big brother voice, even though he was 5 years younger than me. I've got connections at some of these medical billing companies. If we make regular payments, show good faith, I can work out deals. Keep them from coming after the house. The house that got my attention real quick. This place was all I had left of my life with Beverly. Every room held memories. The kitchen where she taught me to make her famous pot roast. The living room where we watched TV together every night for 3 decades, her feet tucked under my leg on the couch. The bedroom where I still slept on my side of the bed, leaving hers empty out of habit. How much are we talking about? I asked. If you can manage $800 a month, I can make this work. I'll handle all the negotiations, deal with the billing companies directly, make sure everything gets paid properly and on time. You just send me the money, and I'll take care of the rest. You won't have to deal with any of this stress. $800 a month was tight, real tight, but doable if I cut back on everything. It meant no more eating out, no cable TV, buying generic everything at the grocery store. I'd have to cancel my subscription to Popular Mechanics, stop going to the monthly poker game with the guys from work because I couldn't afford the $20 buy-in. But if it meant keeping my house, keeping the last piece of my life with Beverly, I'd make it work. So I started sending Dale $800 every month. At first, I'd drive to the bank and get a cashier's check, mail it to his address. But Dale suggested wire transfers would be faster, more secure. Time is money with these medical billing people, he said. The quicker we pay, the better deals I can negotiate. The wire transfers were easy enough once I figured out how to do them. Every 15th of the month, I'd drive down to First National Bank on Ingersoll Avenue, fill out the forms, hand over my $800. The teller, a nice young woman named Sandra, got to know me after a few months. Same transfer again, Mr. Williams? She'd ask, already pulling up Dale's account information on her computer. Yep, same as always. Your brother's lucky to have someone so reliable helping him out. If she only knew for 8 years. I wired Dale $800 on the $15 of every month. He'd always text me back within a few hours. Got it, thanks. Making progress with the creditors. Sometimes he'd call with updates about negotiations, how he'd gotten another bill reduced, how we were slowly chipping away at the total. Carl, you're not going to believe this, he said during one call in 2018. I got that radiology bill knocked down from $3,200 to $1,800. These guys really respect consistency in payments. You're doing great, brother. I trusted him completely. Why wouldn't I? Dale was my little brother. We grew up in the same house on Elm Street, shared the same bedroom until Dale was 16 and Dad finally finished the basement room. When our dad died in 1998, Dale delivered a beautiful eulogy about family sticking together through thick and thin. When Beverly got her diagnosis, he was at the hospital every week during her treatments, bringing flowers, joking with the nurses to keep our spirits up, holding my hand when the doctors delivered bad news. The sacrifices started small but added up fast. I switched from name-brand cereal to generic, started buying day-old bread from the discount rack, canceled the newspaper subscription Beverly had maintained for 20 years because we needed to stay informed. I stopped getting my hair cut at the barber shop where I'd gone for 15 years and bought a pair of clippers to do it myself. The house started showing signs of neglect too. The gutters needed cleaning, but I couldn't afford to hire someone and wasn't comfortable getting up on a ladder at my age. The front porch railing had a loose board that I kept meaning to fix, but lumber was expensive. The water heater started making strange noises, but as long as it was still producing hot water, I told myself it could wait. Winters were the hardest. I'd keep the thermostat at 65 degrees, wear sweaters inside, and pile extra blankets on the bed. My heating bills were still $200, $300 a month, money that could have gone to other things. Dale would sometimes ask if I was doing okay financially, if the monthly payments were too much of a strain. I'm managing fine, I'd tell him, even when I wasn't. Beverly's medical bills are more important than my comfort. You're a good man, Carl. Beverly would be proud of how you're handling all this. That always got to me. The idea that I was honoring Beverly's memory by making sure her bills got paid. It made the sacrifices feel worthwhile, even noble somehow. My kids lived too far away to notice the changes day to day. Roy had moved to Portland for work right after college and stayed there when he got married. Joyce was down in Phoenix with her family. Glenn, my youngest, was up in Seattle doing something with computers that I never fully understood. They'd call every few weeks, visit for holidays, but they had their own lives, their own problems. I didn't want to burden them with mine. Christmas of 2019 was when I really noticed how tight money had gotten. Joyce's daughter Emma was 16 then, really into art, and I wanted to get her some nice supplies for her birthday. But after the monthly payment to Dale, after groceries and utilities and the car payment, there just wasn't much left over. I ended up getting her a $25 gift card to the art store instead of the professional drawing set I'd seen her looking at online. "It's perfect, Grandpa," she said when she opened it, but I could see the disappointment in her eyes. She was too polite to show it, but I knew. That night, lying in bed in the quiet house, I felt like I was failing everyone, Beverly's memory, my grandchildren, myself. The isolation was getting to me too. I'd always been social, had friends from work, neighbors I'd talked to over the fence, but $800 a month didn't leave room for social activities. No more coffee with the guys at the diner on Saturday mornings, no more bowling league on Thursday nights. When Ed Jameson invited me to his retirement party, I had to decline because I couldn't afford a decent gift. "You sure you can't make it?" Ed asked. "It won't be the same without you there." "Sorry, Ed. Family obligations." It wasn't exactly a lie, but it wasn't the whole truth either. Dale, meanwhile, seemed to be doing better than ever. When he'd visit, which was less and less frequently, he'd pull up in a newer truck, wear clothes that looked expensive. When I asked about it, he'd say business was finally picking up, that his consulting work was paying off. "Things are looking up for both of us," he said during one visit in 2020. "Your payments are really making a difference with the medical bills, and my business contacts are starting to pay dividends." I was happy for him. We'd both struggled after high school, me finding my place at the factory, him bouncing between jobs and schemes. It was good to see one of us finally getting ahead. But that phone call from Judith Wright changed everything. Standing in my kitchen with coffee soaking into the floor, holding a phone that had just delivered impossible news, I felt like the ground was shifting under my feet. "Mr. Williams, are you still there?" she asked. "Yeah, I'm here, just processing this information." "Sir, I need to ask, who told you there were outstanding medical bills?" "My brother Dale Coleman. He's been helping me handle all the paperwork, dealing with the billing companies." Another pause. "Mr. Williams, I think you need to contact your local authorities. This sounds like it could be fraud." Fraud. The word hit me like a punch to the gut. I hung up and just sat there, staring at the broken coffee mug, brown liquid soaking into the cracks between the floor tiles. 8 years, $800 a month. That's $76,800. $76,800. I got up, stepped carefully around the mess, and walked to my bedroom like I was sleepwalking. In the bottom drawer of the dresser, underneath some old sweaters Beverly had knitted, I keep all my important papers. Bank statements, tax returns, Beverly's death certificate. And there, in a manila envelope that had grown thick over the years, were 96 wire transfer receipts. Every one of them made out to Dale Coleman, $800 each. The numbers stared back at me from those little yellow slips. January 15th, 2017, $800. February 15th, 2017, $800. March 15th, 2017, $800, page after page, month after month, year after year. A paper trail of my own foolishness, $76,800. That money could have fixed the roof that's been leaking for 3 years now. Every time it rains hard, I have to put a bucket in the corner of the spare bedroom where water drips through a loose shingle. Could have helped my son Roy when he was going through his divorce and struggling to pay legal fees. Could have paid for Joyce's daughter Emma to go to that summer art camp she wanted so badly, the one I had to tell her we couldn't afford. I called Dale's number with shaking fingers. It went straight to voicemail. "Hey, this is Dale. You know what to do." That cheerful voice, the same one that had been reassuring me for 8 years that everything was under control, that the medical bills were getting smaller every month. "Dale, it's Carl. I need to talk to you. Call me back." He didn't call back that day or the next. By Thursday, I was pacing around the house like a caged animal, jumping every time the phone rang, hoping it would be Dale with some explanation that would make sense of all this. Maybe there was a mistake. Maybe the insurance company was wrong. Maybe there were bills from other providers that they didn't know about. But deep down, I was starting to remember things that hadn't made sense at the time. The way Dale had been evasive when I asked to see updated statements. How he'd always changed the subject when I suggested calling the billing companies directly. The fact that in 8 years of monthly payments, we never seemed to make any real progress on the total amount owed. By Friday, I couldn't stand it anymore. I drove over to the apartment complex on the south side of town where Dale had been living since his divorce in 2015. It was one of those newer developments with names like Sunset Manor or Heritage Oaks, trying to sound fancy but really just basic 2-bedroom units for people who couldn't afford houses. I knocked on apartment 2B, the one I'd been sending Christmas cards to for years. A woman I'd never seen before answered the door. She was maybe 30, wearing scrubs like she worked at a hospital. "Can I help you?" "I'm looking for Dale Coleman. Does he still live here?" She looked confused. "I've been living here for 8 months. Before that, it was a guy named Martinez, but I never met any Dale." "Are you sure?" "Tall guy, brown hair, drives a pickup truck." Sorry, doesn't ring a bell. You might want to check with the manager's office. The manager was a heavy-set man named Peterson, who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else than dealing with tenant inquiries. He pulled up his records on an old computer that took forever to load each screen. Coleman. Yeah, here he is. Dale Coleman. Lease expired. February 2023. Didn't renew. Did he leave a forwarding address? Nope, just moved out. Happens all the time. February 2023. That was almost 2 years ago. Dale had been collecting my money for almost 2 years without even living at the address I thought he lived at. Where the hell was he? And more importantly, where was my money? I drove home in a daze, my mind spinning with questions that didn't have good answers. If Dale wasn't living at that apartment, where was he? If there were no medical bills, what had he been doing with my money? And why hadn't I questioned any of this sooner? That night, I couldn't eat dinner, couldn't watch TV. Couldn't do anything but sit in my recliner and stare at those wire transfer receipts spread out on the coffee table like evidence at a crime scene, which I was starting to realize they probably were. I called Roy, my oldest son, who works for an insurance company up in Portland. He's always been the sensible one, the one who thinks things through before acting. If anyone could help me make sense of this mess, it would be Roy, Dad. What's wrong? You sound terrible. I explained the whole conversation with Judith Wright about Dale disappearing from his apartment, about the $76,800 I'd been sending to someone who might have been lying to me for 8 years. Roy went quiet for a long time. I could hear his wife, Beth, in the background asking what was wrong, could hear Roy shushing her. Dad, slow down. Let me make sure I understand this. You've been sending Dale $800 a month because he told you Mom had outstanding medical bills? That's right. And now the insurance company is saying there were never any outstanding bills. That's what they're saying. Dad, you need to get copies of all Mom's insurance records. Right now, tonight, if possible. And you need to talk to a lawyer. A lawyer, Roy. I can't afford Dad, listen to me. If what you're telling me is true, Dale has been stealing from you for 8 years. This isn't about affording a lawyer. This is about getting your money back and making sure he doesn't do this to anyone else. That weekend, Roy drove down from Portland. 5 hours straight without stopping, he told me later. I'd made his favorite pot roast, but neither of us had much appetite as we spread everything out on the dining room table. The wire transfer receipts, the fake billing documents Dale had shown me back in 2016, printouts of text messages I'd saved over the years. Roy went through each piece of paper methodically, like he was conducting an audit. He'd inherited that careful nature from Beverly, who used to balance our checkbook to the penny every month. Dad, look at these documents Dale showed you, he said, holding up one of the fake medical bills under the dining room light. This letterhead doesn't match the real insurance company format. And look at this, the address is wrong. Midwest Insurance Group is on Grand Avenue, not Locust Street. I put on my reading glasses and really studied those papers for the first time in 8 years. Roy was right. The logos were slightly off, pixelated like someone had downloaded them from the internet and printed them on regular paper. The fonts were inconsistent. The signatures looked like they'd been copied and pasted. He made these up, I said, the realization hitting me like cold water. While I was grieving Beverly, while I was barely holding it together, he was sitting somewhere creating fake documents to steal from me. Roy reached across the table and squeezed my shoulder. Dad, we're going to fix this. But first, we need real evidence. If we're going to get your money back, we need to prove exactly what he did and when he did it. Sunday morning, we drove to the Midwest Insurance Group office. It was closed, but Roy had called ahead and arranged for Judith Wright to meet us there. She was younger than I'd expected from her voice, maybe 40, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Mr. Williams, I'm so sorry you're going through this, she said, leading us to a small conference room. Elder financial abuse is more common than people realize, and it's usually committed by family members. She pulled up Beverly's complete file on her computer. Every claim, every payment, every piece of correspondence from 2015 to 2017. The cancer treatments, the hospital stays, the medications, the experimental therapy we tried in those last desperate weeks, everything was covered. The insurance company had paid out $19 The only out-of-pocket expense was your $2,000 deductible, which was paid by automatic withdrawal from your checking account in December 2016. Judith explained, showing us the records on her screen. After that, the account was settled, zero balance. But I never saw any notification that everything was paid off, I said. Judith clicked through to another screen. We sent final settlement letters to the policyholder and the estate executor. According to our records, both letters were mailed to. She paused, reading the address. 1247 South Union Street, apartment 2B. That was Dale's old apartment. The one he'd moved out of 2 years ago. That's not my address, I told her. That's where my brother lived. Judith and Roy exchanged a look. Mr. Williams, your brother wasn't authorized to receive correspondence about your wife's account. If he intercepted mail intended for you and the estate, that's mail fraud. A federal crime. Roy leaned forward. Can you print out everything? All the correspondence, all the settlement documents, all the payment records? Absolutely. Mr. Williams, I want to help you get to the bottom of this. She printed out a stack of papers 2 inches thick. Every detail of Beverly's medical expenses. Every insurance payment, every piece of communication the company had sent. Looking at it all laid out in black and white, it was obvious there had never been any outstanding bills. Dale had invented the entire story. That afternoon, Roy and I sat in my kitchen with every piece of evidence we'd gathered. The insurance record showing zero balance. The fake billing statements Dale had created. Bank records showing 96 wire transfers totaling $76,800. Text messages from Dale over the years, reassuring me that progress was being made. Dad, we need to be smart about this, Roy said. If Dale realizes we're onto him, he might try to hide assets or disappear completely. We need to get him on record admitting what he did. How do we do that? Roy pulled out his smartphone. You're going to call him and get him to confess. And we're going to record every word. The idea made my stomach churn. Dale was still my brother, whatever he'd done. The thought of setting him up, of tricking him into incriminating himself, felt wrong somehow. Dad, I know this is hard, but he's been stealing from you for 8 years. He watched you struggle, watched you give up things you needed, and he never once felt guilty enough to stop. You don't owe him anything. Roy was right. I thought about all the sacrifices I'd made, the roof repairs I couldn't afford, the Christmas presents I couldn't buy for my grandchildren, the social activities I'd given up because $800 a month left no room for extras. What do I say to him? Tell him you've been contacted about some kind of audit or investigation. Nothing specific, nothing that would make him panic and run. Just enough to make him nervous, to get him talking. Roy showed me how to use the voice recording app on my phone. Simple enough. Just open the app and hit the red button. We practiced with it until I was comfortable with the controls. Remember, Dad, the goal is to get him to admit that there were never any real medical bills. If he says that on tape, along with all this other evidence, we'll have everything we need for both criminal charges and a civil lawsuit. I looked at the phone number I'd been calling for 8 years, the number I'd trusted more than any other. My hands were shaking as I dialed. Dale picked up on the third ring. Carl? Hey, brother. How are you doing? The cheerful familiarity in his voice made me sick to my stomach. Here was the man who'd been stealing from me for nearly a decade, and he was talking like nothing had happened. I'm fine, Dale. Listen, I got a call from some kind of audit company about Beverly's medical expenses. They're saying there might be some discrepancies in the records. There was a pause. What kind of audit company? I don't know. Some government thing. They want to review all the payments that were made. I told them you've been handling everything, but they said they need to talk to both of us. Carl, that sounds like a scam to me. You shouldn't give those people any information. That's what I figured, but they seem to know a lot about Beverly's case. They mentioned specific amounts, specific dates. It made me nervous. Another pause, longer this time. Look, Carl, why don't we meet up and talk about this in person? I can bring all the paperwork, show you exactly where we stand with everything. This was it. Dale was taking the bait. That sounds good.
How about tomorrow?
That diner on MLK Boulevard, the one we used to go to with Dad? Perfect. Say 10 a.m. I'll bring everything. See you then, Dale. I hung up and looked at Roy. He wants to meet tomorrow at 10. He's going to bring paperwork. More fake documents, probably. Dad, this is good. Face to face, you'll have a better chance of getting him to slip up, but you need to be careful. Don't let him know you're recording, and don't accuse him directly until you've got him talking. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about all the times Dale had called over the years, updating me on his progress with the medical bills. Had he been laughing at me? Did he think I was stupid, or did he just not care that he was stealing from his own brother? The next morning, I got to the diner early and chose a booth in the back corner, away from the kitchen noise. The place hadn't changed much since Dad used to bring us here for pancakes after church on Sundays. Same red vinyl booths, same black and white checkered floor, same smell of bacon grease and coffee. When Dale walked in, I hardly recognized him. He was wearing a leather jacket that looked like it cost more than my monthly grocery budget, expensive-looking boots, and he was driving a truck I'd never seen before, a new Ford F-150 with all the bells and whistles. For a guy who'd been struggling with his own business problems, he sure was living well, Carl. He slid into the booth across from me with a big smile, like this was just a casual family get-together. Good to see you, brother. You're looking good. Thanks, Dale. You too. Nice jacket. He glanced down at it like he'd forgotten what he was wearing. Oh, this old thing. Got it on sale. I'd already started the recording app on my phone, keeping it face down on the table. Roy had taught me to act natural, to ease into the conversation instead of jumping straight to accusations. So what's this about an audit? Dale asked, pulling a manila folder from his jacket. I brought some recent statements, but honestly, Carl, this sounds like one of those scam operations. They probably got your information from a data breach somewhere. Maybe you're right, but they seem to know specific details about Beverly's treatments. It made me nervous. Dale opened the folder and spread out what looked like more fake billing statements. Look, here's where we stand right now. The oncology bills are almost paid off, and I've been negotiating with the hospital about the radiology charges. We're making real progress. I stared at the papers, knowing they were complete fiction. Dale, I need to ask you something, and I want a straight answer. His smile faltered just a bit. Sure, what's on your mind? How much more do we owe, total? Well, that's hard to say exactly. These medical billing companies, they add interest and fees. Sometimes they transfer accounts to collection agencies. I'd estimate we're down to maybe $15,000 or $20,000 after 8 years of payments totaling $7. After 8 years of payments totaling 76,800 Aries, we supposedly still owed $15,000. The math didn't add up, and it never had. That seems like a lot considering how much I've already paid. Dale's voice took on a patronizing tone. Carl, medical billing is complicated. That's why you needed me to handle this stuff. You're not equipped to deal with their bureaucracy and all the insurance regulations. That stung, but I pushed forward. Dale, I got a call from the insurance company last week. They said Beverly's account was settled years ago. They said there were never any outstanding bills. Dale's face went through a series of expressions: surprise, confusion. Then what looked like calculation. Carl, that doesn't make sense. I've been dealing with these people for 8 years. There must be some mistake in their records. They showed me documentation. Everything was paid in 2016. Look, Carl, insurance companies make mistakes all the time. Sometimes they don't have complete information, especially when there are multiple providers involved. That's exactly why you needed me to coordinate everything. I leaned forward. So you're saying the insurance company is wrong? I'm saying their records might not be complete. There were bills from specialists, labs, pharmacies that might not show up in their main system. Dale, I've been sending you $800 a month for 8 years. Where has that money been going? Dale's demeanor shifted. He looked around the diner like he was planning an escape route. Carl, you've been under a lot of stress since Beverly died. Sometimes grief can make people confused about things, make them remember conversations differently than they actually happened. I'm not confused, Dale. I have receipts for every wire transfer, $76,800 total. Where did it go? The number hung in the air between us. Dale's face went pale, then flushed red. He fumbled with the papers in front of him, but his hands were shaking slightly. Carl, I think we should continue this conversation somewhere more private. Not here. We're continuing it right here, right now. Where's my money? Dale stood up abruptly, but I reached across the table and grabbed his wrist. Sit down, Dale. Something in my voice must have gotten through to him because he sat back down. Maybe it was the tone I used to use with workers at the plant when they tried to give me excuses for missing their quotas. I'm going to ask you one more time, and I want a straight answer. Were there ever any medical bills? Dale looked around the diner again, then leaned across the table and lowered his voice. Okay, fine. Maybe the situation was more complicated than I initially explained. What does that mean? It means, look, Carl, there were some issues with Beverly's coverage that the insurance company didn't want to acknowledge. Off-the-books treatments, experimental procedures that weren't officially approved. That's not what they told me. They said everything was covered, everything was paid. Carl, you're getting worked up over nothing. The important thing is that Beverly got the care she needed. Isn't that what matters? I stared at my brother across the table, this man I'd trusted with everything, and finally asked the question I should have asked 8 years ago. Dale, tell me the truth. Were there any medical bills at all? The silence stretched between us for what felt like forever. Dale's eyes darted everywhere except at my face. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. No, no, the word hit me like a physical blow. Even though I'd suspected it, even though all the evidence pointed to it, hearing Dale actually say it out loud was devastating. So where did my money go? Dale couldn't meet my eyes, Carl. You have to understand, I was in a really bad place back then. My business was failing. I was going through the divorce. I had creditors calling me every day. I was about to lose everything. So you decided to steal from me instead. It wasn't stealing. His voice rose, then he looked around and lowered it again. You gave me that money willingly. I never forced you to send it. I gave it to you because you lied to me. You told me Beverly had outstanding bills. I thought I could pay you back before you ever found out. I had some investments lined up, some business deals that were supposed to pay off big. But then the economy tanked in 2018 and everything fell through. I felt a strange calm wash over me. After 8 years of wondering, 8 years of sacrificing, I finally had the truth. My own brother had been living off my grief and trust. How much of the $76,800 did you actually use for yourself? Dale was sweating now, despite the air conditioning in the diner. It's not that simple, Carl. Some of it went to business expenses, some to legal fees during the divorce. I was trying to get back on my feet so I could pay you back. How much, Dale? Most of it, he whispered. I reached into my pocket and turned off the recording app. I had what I needed. What was the fishing cabin, Dale? His head snapped up. What fishing cabin? The one you bought in 2017. Roy found the property records. Down payment of $35,000. Where do you think that money came from? Dale's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. How did you, who's been looking into my finances, people who care about the truth? What about the truck you're driving? The one that cost more than most people make in a year. Carl, you don't understand. I understand perfectly. You've been living like a king while I've been eating generic cereal and skipping meals to send you money every month. Dale tried a different approach, leaning forward with the same concerned expression he'd used at Beverly's funeral. Carl, we're family. We can work this out without getting lawyers and police involved. I'll pay you back. It might take some time, but I'll pay back every penny with what money? You just told me your business failed. I'll figure something out. I always do. I stood up, my legs feeling steadier than they had in days. Dale, you've had 8 years to figure something out. Instead, you kept taking my money and lying to my face about it, Carl. Please, think about what this will do to the family. Think about what Dad would have said about brothers fighting like this. Dad would have said stealing is wrong, no matter who you steal from. Dale reached across the table and grabbed my arm. Carl, I'm begging you, don't do anything rash. We can fix this between ourselves. I looked down at his hand on my arm, the same hand that had comforted me at Beverly's funeral, the same hand that had signed all those fake documents. Then I looked at his face, searching for some sign of the little brother I used to protect on the playground, the kid I taught to ride a bike and throw a curveball. He wasn't there anymore. Maybe he never had been. Dale, you had every opportunity to tell me the truth. 8 years of opportunities. Instead, you chose to keep lying and keep stealing. This isn't about family anymore. This is about crime. I walked out of that diner feeling lighter than I had in years. Not happy, exactly, but relieved. The uncertainty was over. The wondering and worrying and second-guessing myself was over. I knew exactly what Dale had done, and now I knew exactly what I had to do about it. Roy was waiting for me at my house, pacing around the kitchen like an expectant father. Did you get it? He asked as soon as I walked in. I pulled out my phone and played back Dale's confession. Roy listened to the whole thing without saying a word, his face getting harder with each admission. Dad, this is perfect. He admitted there were never any medical bills. He admitted he used your money for personal expenses. That's textbook fraud. What happens now? Now we take this to the police, and we call that lawyer I found, Sharon Kelly. She specializes in elder financial abuse cases. I sat down heavily at the kitchen table. Roy, I need you to understand something. Once we do this, there's no going back. Dale is your uncle. He's been part of our family for your entire life. Roy sat down across from me, his expression serious. Dad, he stopped being family the minute he decided to steal from you. What kind of man watches his brother struggle to pay bills he made up? What kind of person takes advantage of someone who's grieving? He was right, of course, but it still hurt. Despite everything Dale had done, despite all the lies and theft and manipulation, part of me still remembered the kid who used to follow me around, who looked up to me as his big brother. There's something else you need to know, Roy said. While you were at the diner, I did some more research on Dale's finances. That fishing cabin? He didn't just buy it. He's been renting it out through one of those vacation rental websites. He's been making money off your money. The betrayal cut deeper. It was bad enough that Dale had stolen from me, but to turn around and profit from it even more, to build a business using money he'd taken from his grieving brother? How much has he made renting it out? Based on the rates I found online, probably $20,000 to $25,000 a year. For the past 7 years, $15,000 or more in rental income, all generated by a cabin he'd bought with my money. Money I'd sent him thinking I was paying Beverly's medical bills. Money I'd scraped together by skipping meals and canceling subscriptions and putting buckets under leaky roofs. Roy, call that lawyer. Call her right now. Sharon Kelly's office was in a downtown building I remembered from when Beverly and I used to go to the farmer's market on weekends. The lobby still had that old-fashioned elegance. Marble floors, brass fixtures, the kind of place that made you feel like serious business got done there. Sharon was younger than I'd expected from Roy's description, maybe 45, with sharp, intelligent eyes and a firm handshake. Her office walls were covered with certificates and awards, but also family photos that made the space feel warm despite the legal books and filing cabinets. Mr. Williams, I've reviewed the materials your son sent over, and I have to tell you, this is one of the most clear-cut cases of family financial exploitation I've seen. Your brother's actions constitute both civil and criminal fraud. She played Dale's recorded confession on a small speaker, taking notes as his voice filled the room admitting there had never been any medical bills. When it finished, she looked up with a grim expression. On the civil side, we can sue him for the full $76,800 plus punitive damages, interest, and legal fees. Given the duration and calculated nature of the fraud, we're looking at potentially $150,000 or more in total damages. What are the chances of actually collecting that money? That's where it gets interesting. Your son's research shows your brother has significant assets: the fishing cabin, the truck, the rental income. People who commit this kind of fraud usually spend the money, but your brother seems to have invested it. That works in our favor. Sharon pulled out a legal pad and started sketching out our options. On the criminal side, this is wire fraud, which is a federal offense. The fact that it crossed state lines when you sent money to his account makes it federal jurisdiction. We're also looking at potential mail fraud for intercepting the insurance company's correspondence. What kind of prison time are we talking about? For the amount involved and the duration of the scheme, he could be looking at 5 to 10 years, though first-time offenders sometimes get lighter sentences if they cooperate and make restitution. The idea of my little brother going to prison made my stomach turn. Even after everything he'd done, what if he just pays the money back? Could we avoid the criminal charges? Sharon shook her head. Mr. Williams, that's not how it works. The criminal charges aren't up to you, they're up to the prosecutor, and frankly, they should be pursued. Your brother didn't just steal from you. He committed a systematic long-term fraud that shows he's a danger to other vulnerable people. She was right, of course. How many other people had Dale conned over the years? How many other grieving relatives had he manipulated with fake documents and false sympathy? What's our first step? We file a police report today. Then we file the civil lawsuit. The key is to move quickly before your brother has a chance to hide assets or leave the jurisdiction. An hour later, Roy and I were sitting in the Des Moines Police Department talking to Detective Neil Parker. He was a tired-looking man about my age who specialized in financial crimes. His desk was covered with case files, and I got the impression he'd heard stories like mine before. Mr. Williams, family financial exploitation is unfortunately very common, he said after listening to Dale's recorded confession. The good news is you did something very smart by documenting everything and getting that confession on tape. Detective Parker examined the wire transfer receipts, the fake billing documents, the insurance company's settlement letters. This is a solid case. We'll open an investigation immediately, but I should warn you, these things can take time. We'll need to subpoena bank records, analyze the fake documents, potentially interview witnesses. How long are we talking about? 6 months to a year for the investigation. Then it depends on whether your brother fights the charges or pleads guilty. What happens to him in the meantime? We'll issue a warrant for his arrest. Given the amount of money involved and the fact that he's already shown a willingness to deceive family members, he might be considered a flight risk. That afternoon, Roy had to drive back to Portland for work, but before he left, he sat me down for a serious conversation. Dad, I need you to prepare yourself for what's coming. Dale's going to try to turn the family against you. He's going to claim you're confused, that this is all a misunderstanding, that you're being vindictive. I'd already thought about that. Dale was charismatic when he wanted to be good at making people see things his way. What should I tell people? Tell them the truth. Show them the evidence. Anyone who really cares about you will believe you once they see the facts, and if they don't, Roy squeezed my shoulder. Then they were never really on your side to begin with. That evening, I called my other kids to tell them what was happening. Joyce was shocked, but supportive. Dad, I always thought something was off about Uncle Dale handling Mom's bills. You should have told us you were struggling financially. Glenn was angrier. That son of a bitch. Sorry, Dad, but that's what he is. Taking advantage of you when you were grieving Mom, that's unforgivable. But the hardest call was to Beverly's sister, Margaret, who lived in Cedar Rapids. Margaret and Dale had always gotten along well, and I knew she'd have trouble believing what he'd done. Carl, that doesn't sound like Dale, she said after I explained the situation. Are you sure there wasn't just some miscommunication? Maybe the insurance company made a mistake. Margaret, I have Dale's confession on tape. He admitted he made up the whole thing. There was a long pause. Even if that's true, don't you think going to the police is a bit extreme? Can't you work this out as a family? He stole $76,800 from me over 8 years. How exactly do you work that out as a family? I don't know, Carl, but destroying Dale's life isn't going to bring Beverly back. That stung because it missed the point entirely. This wasn't about bringing Beverly back. This was about justice, about accountability, about making sure Dale faced consequences for what he'd done. After I hung up, I sat in my living room thinking about Margaret's words. Was I destroying Dale's life? Or was Dale's life being destroyed by his own actions finally catching up with him? I looked around the room at all the things I'd been unable to afford over the past 8 years. The carpet that needed replacing, the walls that needed painting, the old TV that should have been updated years ago, all because I'd been sending $800 a month to pay bills that didn't exist. No, I decided, I wasn't destroying Dale's life. I was getting my own life back. 3 days later, Detective Parker called with news. Mr. Williams, we arrested your brother this morning at his residence. He's been charged with wire fraud, theft by deception, and financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. Where was he living? A rental house on the east side. Much nicer place than you'd expect someone to afford on the income he's been reporting to the IRS. Of course it was. Dale had been living well while I'd been counting every penny. What happens next? He'll be arraigned tomorrow morning. His lawyer will probably try to get him released on bail, but given the flight risk and the amount of money involved, we're going to argue for detention. That afternoon, my phone started ringing. First, it was Dale's ex-wife, Karen, who I hadn't spoken to since their divorce. Carl, what the hell is going on? Dale called me from jail saying you had him arrested for some kind of misunderstanding about Beverly's medical bills. It's not a misunderstanding, Karen. He's been stealing from me for 8 years. That's impossible. Dale might have his faults, but he's not a thief. I explained the whole situation, the fake bills, the confession, the evidence. Karen went quiet for a long time. Jesus, Carl, I'm sorry. When we were married, there were times when money would just appear, and Dale would say he'd gotten lucky with some investment or consulting job. I never questioned it because I didn't want to look too closely. Did you know about the fishing cabin? I knew he bought it, but he said he'd gotten a loan from his business partner. Carl, if I'd known he was stealing from you, I know, Karen, it's not your fault. But the call from Dale's son, Tommy, was harder. Tommy was 28, worked construction, had always looked up to me as a sort of father figure since Dale had never been much of a dad. Uncle Carl, there has to be some mistake. Dad says you're having some kind of breakdown, that you're confused about things. Tommy, I have your father's confession on tape. He admitted he made up Beverly's medical bills. But why would he do that? How do you explain to someone that their father is capable of systematic theft from family? How do you shatter a young man's illusions about the person who raised him? Your dad had financial problems and he saw an opportunity to take advantage of my grief. I'm sorry, Tommy, but that's the truth. This is going to destroy him. You know that, right? If he goes to prison, he'll lose everything. He should have thought about that before he decided to steal from me. Tommy hung up on me. The next morning, I drove to the courthouse for Dale's arraignment. I didn't plan to go inside, just wanted to see him being held accountable. But as I was sitting in my truck in the parking lot, Dale's lawyer approached my window. Mr. Williams, I'm Marcus Webb, representing your brother. Could I speak with you for a moment? Webb was younger than I'd expected. Probably in his 30s, with the kind of expensive suit that Dale was probably paying for with my money. Mr. Williams, I think there's been a terrible misunderstanding here. Your brother never intended to defraud you. He genuinely believed he was helping with legitimate medical expenses. That's not what he told me 3 days ago. People say things under stress that they don't mean. Dale is devastated that this situation has gotten so out of hand, he's prepared to make full restitution if you'll consider dropping the charges. I can't drop criminal charges. That's up to the prosecutor, but your cooperation would go a long way. Dale is prepared to pay you back immediately the full $76,800 plus interest. With what money? The money he stole from me in the first place. Webb shifted uncomfortably. Mr. Williams, if this goes to trial, it's going to be very public. Very embarrassing for everyone involved. Family members testifying against each other. Personal financial information becoming part of the public record. Is that really what you want? What I want is for your client to face consequences for what he did, even if it means destroying his life. He's 59 years old, Mr. Williams. A felony conviction at his age would be devastating. He should have thought about that before he started stealing. Webb tried a different approach. What about his son? Tommy's getting married next year. Do you really want his wedding overshadowed by his father being in prison? That one hit home, but I wasn't going to let guilt manipulate me the way Dale had. Mr. Webb, your client, had 8 years to think about the impact his actions would have on his family. 8 years to come clean and make things right. Instead, he chose to keep lying and keep stealing. Tommy's wedding isn't my responsibility. Inside the courthouse, Dale pleaded not guilty to all charges. The judge set bail at $50,000, which Dale's lawyer posted immediately. Another sign that Dale had access to money he'd never mentioned during our years of supposed financial struggle. That evening, Dale called me from his lawyer's office. "Carl, please, we need to talk about this like adults. Like brothers. We're not brothers anymore, Dale. Brothers don't steal from each other. I never meant for it to go on this long. I was going to pay you back as soon as I got back on my feet. When exactly was that going to happen? After another 8 years? After you'd taken another $76,800. Carl, think about what this is doing to the family. Tommy won't speak to me. Karen's telling everyone I'm a fraud. Even Mom's neighbors are talking about it. Our mother had been dead for 15 years, but Dale was right about one thing. Word was getting around. Small town like Des Moines, people talked. The grocery store clerk who'd known Beverly asked if it was true that Dale had been stealing from me. The mailman mentioned he'd heard about it from his wife. Dale, you made this public when you decided to commit crimes. I didn't. I'll pay you back everything, Carl. Every penny plus 20% interest. Just drop this legal nonsense and let's handle it as a family. There's no family left to handle anything with. You destroyed that when you started lying to me. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen and thought about Tommy's wedding, about the rest of the extended family, about how this would ripple through everyone's lives. Part of me felt guilty for setting all this in motion. But then I looked around at my shabby house, thought about all the things I'd given up over the past 8 years, and reminded myself who was really responsible for this mess. Over the next few weeks, Sharon Kelly and her team built our civil case like they were constructing a fortress. Every wire transfer, every fake document, every piece of evidence was cataloged and analyzed. They hired a private investigator named Marlene Cooper, a former police detective who specialized in financial fraud cases. What Marlene found made my blood boil all over again. "Mr. Williams," she said during a meeting at Sharon's office, "your brother has been living quite well off your money. Besides the fishing cabin and the truck, we've documented multiple vacations to Las Vegas, expensive restaurant meals charged to credit cards that were paid off with transfers from the account where you were sending money." She spread out bank statements across Sharon's conference table, like she was laying out evidence at a crime scene. In 2018, he spent $8,000 on a motorcycle. In 2019, dollars on what appears to be a boat. He's maintained a lifestyle that requires about $60,000 a year in income. But his legitimate business only generates about $15,000 annually. So the rest was coming from me. Almost certainly. And there's something else. That fishing cabin, he's been advertising it on rental websites since 2017. Based on the booking calendars we found online, he's been making $25,000 to $30,000 a year in rental income. I did the math in my head. 7 years of rental income at $25,000 per year was $175,000 per money generated by a property he'd bought with funds he'd stolen from me. Can we get that money back too? Sharon nodded. Absolutely. In legal terms, it's called unjust enrichment. He used stolen money to purchase an income-generating asset. So the income from that asset rightfully belongs to you. How much are we talking about total? Between the original theft, the rental income, and punitive damages, we're looking at potentially $300,000 or more. $300,000. It was more money than I'd ever imagined being worth. Enough to fix everything that had been falling apart in my life. Enough to help my kids and grandchildren. Enough to live comfortably for the rest of my days. But the money wasn't really the point anymore. The point was that Dale had to face consequences for what he'd done. What about his criminal case? I asked. Detective Parker tells me the prosecutor is very interested. The amount of money, the duration of the scheme, the fake documents, it all points to a sophisticated long-term fraud operation. They're talking about 5 to 8 years in federal prison. Meanwhile, Dale was clearly trying to rally support from anyone who would listen. My neighbor Dolores Reed stopped me while I was getting my mail one afternoon. Carl, I ran into your brother at the grocery store yesterday. He looked terrible. He says this whole thing is just a big misunderstanding. It's not a misunderstanding. Dolores, he admitted he made up Beverly's medical bills, but he seemed so sincere. He was almost crying when he told me how sorry he was that you'd gotten confused about the payments. That was Dale's strategy, portray me as a confused old man who'd misunderstood a family financial arrangement. Make himself the victim of a tragic misunderstanding rather than the perpetrator of a calculated fraud. Dolores, would you like to hear the recording of him confessing? She looked uncomfortable. Oh, I don't want to get involved in family business, but not everyone was buying Dale's story. Ed Jameson, my old friend from the plant, called to offer support. Carl, I heard what happened. That's a hell of a thing. How you holding up? I'm doing okay, Ed. Better now that the truth is out. Looking back, there were signs. That time Dale showed up at my retirement party in that expensive suit, talking about his new business ventures. I remember thinking he was doing pretty well for a guy who was supposedly struggling. Why didn't you say anything? What was I going to say? Hey Carl, your brother's suit looks too expensive. Besides, it wasn't my business, but now that I know where the money was coming from, Ed's call meant more to me than I'd expected. It helped to know that people who really knew me believed my version of events. The hardest part was the waiting. Criminal cases move slowly and civil cases even slower. While lawyers filed motions and investigators gathered evidence, I was stuck in limbo, unable to move forward, but unable to go back to the way things were. I started seeing a counselor, Dr. Patricia Morrison, who specialized in helping older adults deal with family betrayal. She was about Beverly's age, with the kind of calm presence that made it easy to talk about difficult things. Grief makes us vulnerable, she explained during one of our sessions. When we lose someone close to us, our usual decision-making processes get disrupted. We're more likely to trust people we normally might question, more likely to go along with suggestions that don't quite make sense. So this is my fault for being too trusting? No, Carl. This is Dale's fault for taking advantage of your trust. But understanding why it happened can help you process the anger and guilt. I feel like an idiot for not seeing through it sooner. You feel like an idiot because Dale worked very hard to make you feel that way. The fake documents, the complex explanations about insurance regulations, the constant reassurances that he was handling everything, it was all designed to keep you from asking questions. Dr. Morrison helped me understand that Dale's fraud wasn't just about money, it was about power and control. By positioning himself as the expert who understood complex financial matters while I was just a confused widower, he'd created a dynamic where questioning him felt like admitting incompetence. The fact that you eventually did question him, that you investigated and gathered evidence and took action, that shows strength, not weakness, she said. 3 months after Dale's arrest, Sharon called with an update on the civil case. We're getting close to a settlement offer. Dale's lawyer knows they don't have much of a defense. The evidence is overwhelming. But there's something you need to know. Dale's been trying to hide assets. What kind of assets? He transferred the fishing cabin to his son Tommy's name 3 weeks ago. Probably trying to put it beyond the reach of creditors. Can he do that? Not legally. It's called a fraudulent conveyance, and judges don't look kindly on people who try to hide assets during litigation. But it tells us something important about Dale's mindset. He's not planning to cooperate, he's planning to fight. That information changed everything. Dale wasn't just trying to avoid paying me back. He was actively working to cheat me out of money that was rightfully mine. The little brother I'd protected and helped throughout his life was now treating me like an enemy to be defeated. What can we do about the cabin transfer? I asked Sharon. We file an emergency motion to void the transfer and freeze all of Dale's assets. The judge won't like the timing. Transferring property to family members right after being charged with fraud is a classic move that courts see all the time. Will that work? It should. Tommy's going to be caught in the middle, unfortunately. Either he cooperates and transfers the cabin back, or he becomes part of the fraud conspiracy. I felt bad for Tommy. None of this was his fault, but Dale had dragged him into it by trying to use him to hide assets. It was just one more way Dale was willing to hurt his own family to avoid facing consequences. 2 days later, things escalated in a way I hadn't expected. I was in my backyard trying to repair the loose board on my fence that I'd been putting off for months when I heard a truck pull into my driveway. Through the fence slats, I could see Dale's F-150. I walked around to the front yard, carrying my hammer more for security than anything else. Dale was standing on my front porch with 2 other men I didn't recognize, one about his age wearing a suit, the other younger and bigger, like hired muscle. "Carl, we need to talk," Dale called out. His voice was different than usual, harder somehow. "Get off my property, Dale. Not until we settle this like men instead of hiding behind lawyers and police." The man in the suit stepped forward. "Mr. Williams, I'm Dale's business partner, Rex Coleman. I think there's been a serious misunderstanding here that's gotten way out of hand. Business partner." Dale had never mentioned any business partner in the 8 years he'd been taking my money. Another lie in a web of lies. There's no misunderstanding. Dale stole $76,800 from me. He admitted it on tape. That recording was made under duress. The suit said Dale was confused, upset, not thinking clearly. What he meant was that the financial arrangements between family members had gotten complicated over the years. Dale stepped closer to the porch railing. "Carl, you're 64 years old. You should be enjoying your retirement, not dragging family through court. This vendetta is making you look foolish." "Vendetta? You mean seeking justice for theft." The bigger man who hadn't spoken yet moved closer. He wasn't threatening exactly, but his presence was meant to intimidate. "Mr. Williams, sometimes old people get confused about financial arrangements. Maybe it would be better for everyone if you reconsidered your position." That was definitely a threat. I pulled out my phone. "I'm calling the police." "Don't be dramatic, Carl," Dale said. "We just want to have a civilized conversation about resolving this mess. By bringing muscle to my house, by trying to hide assets you bought with my money." Dale's mask finally slipped. "Your money? Carl, you gave me that money willingly. Every month for 8 years you wired it to me without any complaints. Now suddenly you want to claim I stole it because you lied to me about why you needed it. I needed it to keep my life together. My business was failing. My marriage was falling apart. Creditors were calling every day. You had your pension, your Social Security, this house. You were fine. I was fine because I was sacrificing everything to send you money I thought was paying Beverly's bills." The business partner tried to play peacemaker. "Gentlemen, perhaps we can work out some kind of payment plan. Dale is willing to return a portion of the money over time, a portion. Let's say $30,000 over 5 years. That's fair compensation for any misunderstanding. $30,000 out of $76,800, plus 8 years of interest and the rental income from the cabin. They were offering me pennies on the dollar for money that Dale had stolen. Get off my property, all of you." Dale's voice turned ugly. "Carl, you're making a huge mistake. I've been protecting you from things you don't understand. If this goes to court, it's going to get very ugly for you." "Is that a threat?" "It's a fact. They're going to ask about Beverly's final medical bills, about decisions that were made, about your mental state after she died. They're going to make you look like a confused old man who can't handle his own finances." The implication was clear. Dale was going to attack Beverly's memory, attack my competence, attack everything I cared about to defend himself. I said, "Get off my property." The muscle stepped forward again. "Mr. Williams, I think you should listen to what Dale is trying to tell you for your own good." That's when I'd had enough. I held up my phone. "I've been recording this entire conversation and I'm about to call 911. You have 30 seconds to leave before I file charges for trespassing and intimidation." The 3 of them looked at each other, calculating whether to push further or retreat. The business partner grabbed Dale's arm. "Come on. We've said what we came to say." As they walked back to the truck, Dale turned around one more time. "Carl, you're going to regret this. I promise you that." After they drove away, I sat on my front porch steps and called Detective Parker. "Mr. Williams, threatening a witness is a serious crime. We'll add witness intimidation to the charges. There's something else. Dale brought 2 men with him, including someone he called his business partner, Rex Coleman. We'll look into it. In the meantime, I want you to be careful. People facing serious prison time sometimes do desperate things." That evening, Roy called for our weekly check-in. "Dad, maybe you should come stay with us in Portland for a while, until this gets resolved. I'm not running from my own brother. It's not running. It's being smart. If Dale is desperate enough to show up at your house with backup, he's desperate enough to do other stupid things. But I wasn't leaving. This was my home, the place I'd shared with Beverly for 30 years. Dale had already taken enough from me. He wasn't taking my house too, even temporarily. I did take some precautions. I had a security system installed, complete with cameras and motion sensors. I gave copies of all my evidence to Roy and Joyce in case something happened to me, and I made sure Detective Parker had Dale's new address and license plate number. 2 weeks later, the judge ruled on our motion to freeze Dale's assets. The cabin transfer to Tommy was voided, and all of Dale's property was placed under court protection pending the outcome of both cases. Dale's response was to file a countersuit, claiming I owed him money for 8 years of financial consulting services related to Beverly's estate. The criminal trial began on a cold Monday morning in February, almost 10 months after I'd first learned the truth about Dale's theft. I'd been dreading this day and looking forward to it in equal measure. Dreading having to relive the whole ordeal in public, but looking forward to seeing Dale finally held accountable. The federal courthouse downtown was an imposing building with marble columns and security checkpoints that reminded me this was serious business. Roy had flown in from Portland, and Joyce had driven up from Phoenix. Even Glenn made the trip from Seattle. Having my kids there meant everything to me. The prosecutor was a sharp woman in her 40s named Lisa Martinez. She'd explained to me beforehand that federal wire fraud cases were usually straightforward when the evidence was solid, and our evidence was rock solid. Mr. Williams, your brother's defense is going to try to portray this as a family financial arrangement that got complicated, she'd told me during our preparation session. They'll claim you knew the money wasn't going to medical bills, that you were voluntarily helping Dale with his business troubles, but that's not true. I know it's not true. The jury will know it's not true once they hear the evidence. But Dale's lawyer is going to try to muddy the waters, make this seem like a civil family dispute rather than criminal fraud. Dale's defense attorney, Marcus Webb, had been making noise in the local media about how tragic it was when families turned against each other, how elderly people sometimes became confused about financial arrangements. It was all part of the strategy to make me look like a vindictive old man rather than a victim of crime. The jury selection took 2 days. Webb challenged anyone who'd ever been the victim of financial fraud. Anyone who had elderly relatives they were concerned about, anyone who worked in insurance or banking. He wanted jurors who might be sympathetic to the idea that this was all a big misunderstanding. But prosecutor Martinez was just as careful. She wanted people who understood the difference between family helping family and systematic theft through deception. When opening statements began, Martinez laid out the case methodically. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a story about trust betrayed. Carl Williams lost his wife to cancer in 2016. He was grieving, overwhelmed, vulnerable. His younger brother, Dale Coleman, saw an opportunity to take advantage of that vulnerability, and he took it. She walked the jury through the timeline. The fake medical bills presented right after Beverly's funeral. The 96 wire transfers totaling $76,800. The fishing cabin purchased with stolen money. The rental income generated from that cabin. Dale's confession recorded at the diner. The defendant didn't steal this money in a moment of desperation, Martinez said, looking directly at Dale. He stole it systematically, month after month, year after year, while watching his brother sacrifice basic necessities to pay bills that didn't exist. Webb's opening was exactly what I'd expected. This is not a criminal case. It's a family tragedy. Dale Coleman never stole anything from his brother. Carl Williams gave him money voluntarily to help with family financial difficulties. The so-called confession you'll hear was made by a man under tremendous pressure, saying things he didn't mean to get his brother to calm down. When my time came to testify, I walked to the witness stand feeling 64 years old and then some. The courtroom was packed with reporters, family members, and curious onlookers. Dale sat at the defense table in a blue suit, looking nothing like the man who used to fix my bicycle chain when we were kids. Martinez took me through the story from the beginning. Beverly's illness and death, my grief and confusion. Dale's offer to help with the medical bills, the monthly payments that stretched on for 8 years. Mr. Williams, when your brother showed you those billing documents in 2016, did you have any reason to doubt they were legitimate? No, he was family. I trusted him completely. If you had known there were no outstanding medical bills, would you have sent him any money? Absolutely not. During those 8 years, did you ever suspect that your brother might be lying to you? I thought about that question. There were times when things didn't quite add up. We never seemed to make much progress on the total amount owed despite all the payments. But Dale always had explanations. complications with insurance companies, fees and interest charges, bureaucratic delays. I trusted his explanations because I trusted him. Webb's cross-examination was brutal, but not in the way I'd expected. Instead of attacking me directly, he tried to make me seem confused and unreliable. Mr. Williams, you testified that you were overwhelmed by grief after your wife's death. Is it possible that during that time, your brother mentioned that he was having financial difficulties? He might have. Dale was always having financial difficulties. And is it possible that wanting to help your brother during a difficult time, you agreed to send him money? Not the way it happened. He told me the money was for Beverly's medical bills, but you've acknowledged that your memory of that period isn't perfect due to your grief. Isn't it possible you've confused the reason for the payments? No, I remember perfectly. Dale showed me fake medical bills and told me Beverly owed money she didn't owe. Webb tried several different angles, but I held firm. The evidence was on my side, and I wasn't going to let him twist my words or make me doubt my own memory. The prosecution's next witness was Judith Wright from the insurance company. She brought Beverly's complete medical file and walked the jury through every claim, every payment, every piece of correspondence. By the time she was finished, it was crystal clear that Beverly's account had been settled with zero balance in 2016. Detective Parker testified about his investigation, about the fake billing documents Dale had created, about the pattern of wire transfers that coincided with Dale's major purchases. But the most damaging evidence was Dale's own recorded confession. When Martinez played the tape of our conversation at the diner, the courtroom went completely silent. Dale's voice filled the room, admitting there had never been any medical bills, explaining how he'd used my money for his own purposes. Were there any medical bills at all? No. That single word hung in the air like a verdict. I glanced at the jury and saw the expressions on their faces. Dale had convicted himself with his own words. Webb tried to salvage Dale's defense by putting him on the witness stand, which turned out to be a mistake. Dale had always been good at talking his way out of trouble, but this wasn't a family gathering or a business meeting. This was federal court, and Prosecutor Martinez was ready for him. Mr. Coleman, you heard the recording of your conversation with your brother at the diner. Do you deny saying there were no medical bills? I was confused, under pressure. Carl was acting erratically, and I said things just to calm him down. So you lied to calm him down. I wouldn't call it lying. I was trying to diffuse a tense situation. By telling him there were no medical bills when you'd been collecting money for those bills for 8 years, Dale tried to explain, but every answer made him sound worse. The situation with Beverly's medical expenses was more complicated than Carl understood. There were issues with insurance coverage, pre-authorization problems, disputes with providers. Mr. Coleman, we've heard testimony from the insurance company that all of Mrs. Williams's medical expenses were covered and paid. Are you saying the insurance company is wrong? Insurance companies make mistakes all the time. Martinez pulled out Beverly's complete medical file. Mr. Coleman, can you point to a single bill in this file that wasn't paid by insurance? Dale flipped through the pages, looking increasingly desperate. These records might not be complete. These are the official records from Midwest Insurance Group, the company that covered all of Mrs. Williams' medical expenses. Are you saying they falsified their own records? I'm saying mistakes happen. Let's talk about the fishing cabin you purchased in 2017. Where did the $35,000 down payment come from? I had been saving money from my consulting business. Your business that reported $15,000 in income that year. I also had some investment income. What investments? Dale couldn't answer. He'd painted himself into a corner with lies that didn't add up. Martinez systematically destroyed every piece of his story, using his own bank records and financial documents against him. Mr. Coleman, between 2016 and 2024, your brother sent you $76,800. During that same period, you purchased a $35,000 fishing cabin, a $28,000 truck, a $8,000 motorcycle, and took multiple expensive vacations. Where did the money for all of this come from if not from your brother? I told you, I had business income and investments. Business income of $15,000 a year and no documented investments. Mr. Coleman, isn't it true that you were living off money you stole from your grieving brother? I didn't steal anything. Carl gave me that money after you showed him fake medical bills and lied about insurance complications. Those weren't fake bills. Martinez held up one of the documents Dale had shown me in 2016. Mr. Coleman, this document has the wrong address for Midwest Insurance Group. The logo is pixelated, suggesting it was downloaded from the internet and printed. The signature doesn't match any official company signatures. How do you explain these discrepancies? Dale stared at the document like he was seeing it for the first time. I got those documents from a billing company that was working with the insurance company. What billing company? I don't remember the name. You don't remember the name of the company that gave you documents showing your brother owed $48,000. It was a long time ago, Mr. Coleman. Did you create these fake documents to convince your brother to send you money? No, I did not. Then where did they come from? Dale couldn't answer. He sat there in the witness chair, sweating through his expensive suit, looking like exactly what he was, a man caught in a web of lies. Webb tried damage control during redirect examination, but it was too late. Dale had destroyed his own credibility by taking the stand. Closing arguments were brief. Martinez simply recapped the evidence, the fake documents, the confession, the financial record showing Dale living far beyond his legitimate means. This isn't a complicated case, she told the jury. The defendant systematically defrauded his brother for 8 years. The evidence is overwhelming. Webb made a last desperate appeal for sympathy. Dale Coleman made mistakes, but this is a family matter that got out of hand. Sending a man to federal prison over a family financial dispute serves no one. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. When they returned, the foreman stood up and delivered the verdict on all 3 counts. Guilty. Dale's face went white. His lawyer put a hand on his shoulder, but Dale just stared straight ahead like he couldn't believe what was happening. After 8 years of getting away with it, after months of legal maneuvering and trying to portray himself as the victim, reality had finally caught up with him. Judge Patricia Brennan scheduled sentencing for 2 weeks later, but she had some immediate business to handle. Mr. Coleman, you are remanded into custody pending sentencing. Bailiff, please take the defendant into custody. Watching Dale being led away in handcuffs should have felt like vindication. Instead, it just felt sad. This was my little brother, the kid I'd taught to throw a baseball, who'd been best man at my wedding. Whatever else he'd done, whatever lies he'd told, he was still family. But then I thought about 8 years of sacrifice, 8 years of believing I was honoring Beverly's memory by paying bills that didn't exist, and the sadness turned to something else. Justice. Outside the courthouse, reporters wanted statements. I kept it simple. I'm glad the truth came out. I hope this helps other people recognize the warning signs of family financial fraud. Roy put his arm around my shoulders as we walked to the parking garage. How are you feeling, Dad? Relieved. Finally, after all these months, it's over. Well, the criminal case is over. We still have the civil case. The civil case was scheduled to begin in 6 weeks. That's where we'd recover the money Dale had stolen, plus punitive damages and the rental income from the cabin. Sharon Kelly was confident we'd win, especially now that Dale had been convicted of fraud. But first, there was sentencing to get through. 2 weeks to wait and see how many years Dale would spend in federal prison for stealing from his brother. I spent those 2 weeks trying to process everything that had happened. The betrayal, the investigation, the trial. It felt like the end of one chapter of my life and the beginning of something new. The sentencing hearing was scheduled for 10 a.m. on a Thursday. I'd been dreading it almost as much as the trial itself. There's something final about sentencing, something that makes the consequences real in a way that even a guilty verdict doesn't quite capture. Judge Brennan had a reputation for being tough but fair on white-collar crime. She'd seen plenty of cases like this over her 20 years on the bench. Family members stealing from elderly relatives, people exploiting trust for financial gain. She understood the damage that went beyond just the money. Dale's lawyer had filed a lengthy sentencing memorandum asking for leniency. They painted a picture of a man who'd made mistakes during a difficult period in his life, who was truly sorry for his actions, who deserved a chance at redemption rather than years in federal prison. The prosecutor's memorandum told a different story: 8 years of systematic fraud, fake documents created to deceive a grieving brother, a lifestyle funded by stolen money while the victim sacrificed basic necessities. No remorse until he was caught. Before the sentencing, Judge Brennan allowed victim impact statements. I'd written mine carefully, with help from Dr. Morrison, my counselor. I wanted to focus on the actual impact rather than just expressing anger. Your Honor, my name is Carl Williams, and I'm 64 years old. 8 years ago, I trusted my younger brother to help me handle what I believed were my late wife's medical bills. That trust cost me $7,600 to $800 and nearly a decade of financial hardship. But the money isn't really what this is about. It's about the betrayal of everything family is supposed to mean. Dale watched me struggle. He watched me give up things I needed, skip meals to save money, postpone medical care because I couldn't afford it. He knew I was sacrificing to pay bills that didn't exist, and he never once felt guilty enough to tell me the truth. The psychological impact has been devastating. I've had to question every family relationship, every act of kindness, every offer of help. When your own brother steals from you, it changes how you see the world. I'm not asking for revenge, Your Honor. I'm asking for accountability. Dale needs to face meaningful consequences for what he did, not just to me, but to show other potential victims that this behavior has real costs. Tommy, Dale's son, also spoke. He'd been caught between loyalty to his father and the obvious evidence of guilt. Your Honor, I love my dad, but what he did was wrong. Uncle Carl has always been like a second father to me, and seeing what this has done to him, I can't defend it. I just hope that whatever sentence you impose gives my dad a chance to become the man he should have been all along. That took courage. Tommy was sacrificing his relationship with his father to speak the truth. Dale's ex-wife Karen surprised everyone by showing up. Your Honor, I was married to Dale for 12 years. During that time, there were always unexplained windfalls, money that appeared when we needed it most. Dale would say he'd had a good month with consulting or made a lucky investment. Now I know where at least some of that money came from. I'm ashamed I never asked harder questions. When it was Dale's turn to speak, he stood up slowly. He looked older than his 59 years, worn down by months of legal proceedings and the weight of his crimes finally catching up with him. Your Honor, I want to apologize to my brother Carl, to my family, and to this court. What I did was inexcusable. I told myself I was borrowing the money, that I'd pay it back once my business situation improved. But that was just another lie I told myself to justify taking advantage of Carl's grief. I watched my brother struggle for 8 years and never found the courage to tell him the truth. I let him believe he was honoring my sister-in-law's memory while I was dishonoring it with my lies. I've destroyed my relationship with my brother, damaged my relationship with my son, and brought shame on my entire family. I know nothing I say can undo the harm I've caused. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I'm asking not for mercy, but for the opportunity to eventually make amends, if that's even possible. It was a good speech, probably written by his lawyer. But it was also too little too late. Dale had had 8 years to find that courage and tell me the truth. He'd only found his conscience after being caught and convicted. Judge Brennan reviewed the sentencing guidelines, the evidence, and the impact statements. Mr. Coleman, this court has seen many cases of family financial exploitation, but few as calculated and long-lasting as this one. You created fake documents to deceive your brother. You maintained an elaborate fraud for 8 years. You used stolen money to purchase assets that generated additional income for you. Most troubling to this court is the complete lack of remorse you showed until you were caught. You had countless opportunities to come forward, to tell the truth, to stop taking advantage of your brother's grief. Instead, you continued the fraud year after year, watching him sacrifice while you prospered. The defendant is sentenced to 42 months in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised probation. Additionally, the court orders full restitution of $76,800 plus accrued interest to be paid immediately upon release or through asset forfeiture, if necessary. 42 months, 3.5 years. Dale would be 62 when he got out if he served the full sentence. As the bailiff led Dale away, he turned and looked at me one last time. I thought I saw tears in his eyes, but it was hard to tell if they were tears of remorse or just self-pity. Outside the courthouse, Sharon Kelly was already planning our next steps. The criminal restitution order helps our civil case enormously. We'll probably settle now rather than go to trial. Dale's lawyer knows they can't win. 3 days later, they offered to settle the civil case for $250,000 minus the original theft plus rental income plus punitive damages. It wasn't the full $300,000 Sharon had hoped for, but it was substantially more than what Dale had stolen from me. Take it, I told Sharon. I want this over with. The money would be paid through the sale of Dale's assets, the fishing cabin, the truck, the motorcycle, everything he'd bought with my money. There was a certain justice in that. The settlement money started coming in 6 weeks later. First, $85,000 from the sale of the fishing cabin, then $32,000 from Dale's truck and motorcycle. The rest would come from garnishing whatever wages Dale earned after his release from prison, but Sharon assured me we'd eventually collect every penny. Having that money back felt strange. For 8 years, I'd lived on a tight budget, cutting every corner, denying myself basic comforts. Now suddenly, I had more cash than I'd seen since Beverly's life insurance payout. The first thing I did was fix the damn roof. The contractor, a guy named Pete Morrison, who'd gone to high school with Roy, gave me an estimate of $8,000 for a complete roof replacement. $8,000, exactly 10 months of the payments I'd been sending Dale. Mr. Williams, this roof should have been replaced years ago. Pete told me as we stood in my attic looking at water damage and rotted boards. You're lucky the whole thing didn't collapse during that big storm last winter. I couldn't afford it before. Well, you're doing the right thing now. This new roof will last you 25 years easy. While Pete's crew worked on the roof, I made a list of other things that needed attention. The water heater that had been making strange noises, the front porch steps that were starting to sag, the windows that stuck and leaked cold air. Beverly would have hated seeing the house in such poor condition, but before I spent too much on home improvements, I had other priorities. I wrote checks to my kids and grandchildren, not huge amounts, but enough to make a difference. $10,000 to Roy to help with his daughter's college expenses. $8,000 to Joyce to help with her son's medical bills from a motorcycle accident. $5,000 to Glenn to help him expand his computer business. Emma, my granddaughter, who'd wanted those art supplies years ago, got the biggest surprise. I bought her a complete professional art studio setup, easels, paints, canvases, everything she'd need for the art degree she was pursuing. The total came to $3,000, which would have been impossible when I was sending Dale $800 a month. Grandpa, this is too much, she said when the delivery truck pulled up to her house in Phoenix. Emma, this is money that should have been available years ago when you really needed it. I'm just correcting an old mistake. She cried when she called to thank me. Grandpa, you don't understand. I've been working 2 jobs to pay for art supplies. This changes everything for me. That phone call made every sacrifice of the past 8 years feel worthwhile. The most meaningful purchase I made was a headstone for Beverly's grave. For 8 years, she'd been buried under a simple temporary marker because I couldn't afford the granite monument she deserved. The funeral director had kept asking about it, and I'd kept making excuses about waiting for insurance money or family contributions. Now I could finally give her the memorial she should have had from the beginning. Black granite with gold lettering. Beverly Jean Williams, 1954 to 20116. Beloved wife, mother, and grandmother, forever in our hearts. The day they installed it, I sat on the little bench beside her grave and told her the whole story. About Dale's theft, about the trial, about getting the money back. I like to think she would have been proud of how I'd fought for what was right. You always said I was too trusting. I told her running my fingers over the smooth granite, but you also said standing up for yourself was important. Guess I finally learned how to do both. With the house repairs finished and my family taken care of, I found myself with something I hadn't had in years, discretionary income. Not wealth exactly, but enough money to live comfortably, to make choices based on what I wanted rather than just what I could afford. I started eating better, buying fresh groceries instead of day-old marked-down food. I renewed my subscription to Popular Mechanics and added a couple of other magazines I'd always wanted to read. I bought a new recliner to replace the one that had been sagging for 5 years. But the most important change was social. I rejoined the poker game with my old co-workers from the plant. That first Thursday night back felt like coming home. Carl. Look what the cat dragged in. Ed Jameson called out as I walked into the VFW hall where we played. Thought you'd gotten too fancy for us working stiffs. Just had some financial issues to sort out, I said, pulling up my usual chair at the table. We heard about your brother, said Frank Kowalski, dealing the cards. That's a hell of a thing. Family stealing from family. Yeah, well, it's taken care of now. Good for you for fighting back, Ed said. A lot of people would have just let it slide to avoid family drama. That was exactly what Dale had counted on, that I'd be too embarrassed or too concerned about family harmony to pursue justice. He'd miscalculated badly. The game itself felt rusty at first. I'd forgotten some of the tells and patterns, lost touch with the rhythm of betting and bluffing. But it came back quickly, like riding a bicycle. More importantly, being around the guys again reminded me who I was beyond just being Dale's victim or Beverly's widower. I was Carl Williams. I'd worked 32 years at the same job, raised 3 good kids, been married to the same woman for 35 years. I'd served my community, paid my taxes, helped my neighbors when they needed it. I was a man with value and dignity, regardless of what Dale had tried to take from me. The senior center also welcomed me back with open arms. I'd been volunteering there before Beverly got sick, helping with their tax preparation program for low-income seniors. The director, Ruth Patterson, had been asking me to come back for years. Carl, we could really use your help, she said when I called. We're getting more and more seniors who've been victimized by financial scams. Your experience could help them understand they're not alone. That's how I ended up leading monthly workshops at the Senior Center on financial fraud prevention. The first session drew about 12 people, mostly widows and widowers who'd heard about my case through the local news coverage. Word spread quickly, and within a few months we were regularly getting 25 to 30 attendees. I'd never thought of myself as a public speaker, but talking about what Dale had done to me felt natural. Maybe because I'd lived it, maybe because I understood the shame and confusion that fraud victims felt. These weren't just statistics or case studies. These were real people dealing with real betrayal, often from their own family members. The first thing you need to understand, I'd tell each new group, is that this isn't your fault. Criminals are good at what they do. They study human psychology. They know how to exploit our emotions, especially during vulnerable times like after losing a spouse. The stories people shared were heartbreaking and infuriating. Margaret Foster, 71, whose nephew had convinced her to invest her retirement savings in his cryptocurrency business, which turned out to be nothing more than him spending her money on sports cars and vacation trips. Harold Chen, 68, whose son-in-law had been stealing from his bank account for 3 years, making small withdrawals that Harold attributed to his own forgetfulness. I kept thinking I was losing my memory, Harold told the group during one session. When my account balance didn't match what I thought it should be, I figured I'd forgotten about some purchase or fee. It never occurred to me that my daughter's husband was stealing from me. Mary Rodriguez, 74, had been giving her grandson $500 a month for what she believed were college expenses. Turned out the kid had dropped out of school 2 years earlier and was using her money to support a drug habit. The worst part, Mary said, is that my own daughter knew and didn't tell me. She said she didn't want to break my heart. But finding out the truth like this broke my heart worse than anything. Each story was different, but the patterns were the same. Family members exploiting trust. Victims blaming themselves for being stupid or gullible criminals using emotional manipulation to prevent questions or investigations. Document everything, I'd tell them. Keep copies of all financial statements. Save every text message and email. Write down the dates and details of conversations about money. If something seems wrong, trust your instincts and investigate. I'd share practical advice about protecting assets, about the importance of never giving anyone unrestricted access to accounts, about red flags to watch for. But the most important thing I could offer was hope. You can fight back, I'd say. You can get justice. You can recover your money and your dignity. It won't be easy, and it won't be quick, but it's possible. I'm living proof. Detective Parker started attending my workshops occasionally, sharing information about current scams and explaining how law enforcement investigated financial crimes. Sharon Kelly came by once to talk about the legal options available to fraud victims. But the most powerful speakers were other survivors. Margaret Foster eventually recovered most of her money when her nephew's assets were seized. Harold Chen got his son-in-law arrested and sent to prison for 18 months. Mary Rodriguez's grandson entered a drug treatment program and was slowly paying her back from his job at a warehouse. Mr. Williams gave me the courage to speak up, Margaret told one group. I was so ashamed, so embarrassed that I'd been fooled. But Carl helped me understand that shame belongs to the criminal, not the victim. The workshops weren't just about financial fraud either. They became a support group for seniors dealing with all kinds of family conflicts and betrayals. People shared stories about children who'd abandoned them, relatives who'd contested wills, family members who'd exploited their caregiving roles. I learned that my experience with Dale, as devastating as it had been, wasn't unique. Elder abuse was epidemic, and financial exploitation was one of the most common forms. The difference was that most victims never fought back. They suffered in silence, too ashamed or too scared to seek help. That's when I decided to expand beyond the monthly workshops. I started working with the police department to train officers on recognizing elder fraud. I spoke at community groups, church gatherings, anywhere seniors might be vulnerable to these kinds of crimes. The local newspaper did a follow-up story on my case, focusing on the recovery and the volunteer work. Local man turns fraud victory into mission to help others, the headline read. The article mentioned my workshops and included my contact information for people who needed help. The response was overwhelming. Phone calls and emails from all over Iowa, then from neighboring states, then from across the country. People who'd been victimized by family members, people who suspected fraud but didn't know what to do. Adult children worried about their parents being exploited. I couldn't help everyone directly, but I could connect them with resources in their areas. I developed a network of contacts, lawyers who specialized in elder law, police departments with financial crimes units, victim advocates who understood the unique challenges of family fraud cases. One call that particularly stuck with me came from a man in Oregon whose situation was almost identical to mine. His sister-in-law had been collecting money for their father's supposed medical bills for 5 years. The father had been dead for 3 years. "I don't know what to do," he said. "She's family, my wife's sister. If I expose her, it'll destroy our relationship with my wife's entire family." "Sir, what's your name?" "Bob Patterson." "Bob, let me ask you something. What do you think your father would want you to do? He'd want me to stop her from stealing and make her face consequences." "Then you have your answer. Family relationships built on lies and theft aren't worth preserving." 6 months later, Bob called back to tell me his sister-in-law had pleaded guilty to fraud and was paying restitution. "You were right, Carl. My wife's family was angry at first, but once they understood what really happened, they supported us completely." These conversations reminded me daily why the work mattered. Dale was released from federal prison after serving 34 months of his 42-month sentence. Good behavior, they called it. I found out about it not from any official notification, but from Tommy, who called me on a Tuesday evening in March. "Uncle Carl, I wanted you to hear this from me. Dad got out yesterday. He's staying at a halfway house in Cedar Rapids for now. How is he different? Older? Prison changes people, you know. He keeps talking about wanting to make amends, about how he wants to apologize to you properly." I'd been dreading this conversation for months. Part of me had hoped Dale would just disappear after his release, maybe move to another state, start over somewhere I'd never have to think about him again. But I should have known better. Dale had never been one to quietly fade away. "Tommy, I appreciate you calling, but I'm not interested in any apologies from your father. I understand, Uncle Carl, I really do. But he's my dad, and he's trying to get his life back together. He's been going to counseling in prison, working with addiction specialists about his gambling problem." "Gambling problem? That's where a lot of your money went, apparently. Online poker, sports betting." He says he was addicted, and that's why he couldn't stop taking money from you even when he knew it was wrong. Another excuse. Even now, even after conviction in prison, Dale was still trying to shift responsibility. It wasn't greed or callousness that made him steal from his grieving brother. It was an addiction, something beyond his control. "Tommy, addiction doesn't create fake medical documents. Addiction doesn't make someone look their brother in the eye and lie for 8 years straight." "I know, Uncle Carl. I'm not making excuses for him. I just thought you should know he's out." A week later, Dale called me directly. I almost didn't answer when I saw his name on the caller ID, but curiosity got the better of me. "Carl, thank you for taking my call. I know I don't deserve it." His voice sounded different, smaller somehow, less confident than the man who used to convince me that up was down and black was white. "What do you want, Dale?" "I want to apologize, face to face, if you'll let me. I know saying sorry doesn't undo what I did, but I need you to know how deeply I regret everything." "You had 8 years to regret it while you were doing it. You only started regretting it after you got caught." "That's not true, Carl. I regretted it every single month. Every time you sent that money, every time you called to check on the medical bills, I felt sick about what I was doing, but I was in too deep to stop." "You were in too deep to stop stealing or too deep to stop lying?" "Both. Carl, I know this sounds like another excuse, but I had a serious gambling problem. I was betting online sometimes $2,000 or $3,000 a night. I'd win some, lose more, always thinking the next big win would let me pay you back and get out of the hole." "So you're saying this was all about gambling addiction?" "Not all of it. The gambling made it worse, made me more desperate. But the core problem was that I was selfish and weak. I saw an opportunity to take advantage of your grief and I took it. That's on me, not on any addiction." It was the most honest thing I'd heard Dale say in years, maybe ever. But honesty after the fact didn't change what he'd done. "Dale, what do you want from me?" "Forgiveness, because that's not happening. I want the chance to make amends, real amends, not just words. I'm working now, warehouse job in Cedar Rapids. It doesn't pay much. But I want to send you money every month until I've paid back every penny plus interest. You already paid it back through the asset forfeiture. The legal judgment, yes, but not the emotional debt. Carl, I stole 8 years of your life. I made you live like a poor man when you should have been comfortable. I made you miss out on experiences with your grandchildren. How do I make amends for that?" "You don't. Some things can't be fixed, Dale, so that's it. We're never going to be brothers again. We stopped being brothers the day you decided to steal from me. Everything since then has just been cleanup." There was a long silence on Dale's end. When he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Carl, I know I can't undo what I did. But I'm hoping that someday, maybe years from now, you might be willing to at least be in the same room with me. Maybe at Tommy's wedding, or when we're both old and gray. Dale, Tommy's wedding was 2 years ago, while you were in prison. Another silence. He got married. Beautiful ceremony, Joyce and I were there. He asked me to walk him down the aisle since his father wasn't available. I could hear Dale's sharp intake of breath. He didn't tell me, maybe because he was ashamed of having a father in federal prison for stealing from family. Carl, please, I know I deserve your anger, but don't use my son to hurt me. I'm not using Tommy for anything. I'm telling you the truth. Your choices had consequences for everyone in the family, not just me. After I hung up, I sat in my living room thinking about that conversation. Dale had sounded genuinely remorseful, more humble than I'd ever heard him. Prison had clearly been hard on him, but remorse after the fact doesn't heal the damage that was done. The next day, I got a letter delivered by hand to my house. Dale's halfway house was apparently only 45 minutes away. The letter was handwritten, 5 pages of small, careful script. Carl, I know you don't want to hear from me, but I needed to put these thoughts on paper. I've had 3 years to think about what I did to you, and I understand now that it wasn't just theft, it was betrayal of the deepest kind. You trusted me with your grief, your vulnerability, your love for Beverly's memory. I perverted all of that for my own selfish gain. I read the first page, then put the letter in my desk drawer without finishing it. I wasn't ready for Dale's explanations or apologies, no matter how sincere they might be. 6 months passed before I saw Dale again, and it wasn't by choice. I was at the grocery store on a Saturday morning, the same Hy-Vee where I'd been shopping for 30 years when I spotted him in the produce section. He looked smaller than I remembered, wearing clothes that hung loose on his frame like he'd lost weight in prison. His hair had gone almost completely gray. He saw me at the same time I saw him. For a moment, we just stood there looking at each other across a display of apples. 2 men who used to be brothers, now strangers connected only by a history of betrayal. I turned to walk away, but Dale approached me. Carl, please, just give me 2 minutes. We have nothing to talk about. I know you got my letter. You don't have to respond to it, but I need you to know I meant every word. People were starting to stare. The last thing I wanted was a scene in the produce section where half the customers probably knew both of us. Fine. 2 minutes. Dale's hands were shaking slightly as he spoke. I'm working at a warehouse in Cedar Rapids, 40 hours a week, $15 an hour. It's honest work, and I'm grateful to have it. Every week, I put aside $50 to send to you. I know it's not much, but it's all I can afford right now. I told you I don't want your money, then I'll donate it to that senior center where you volunteer or to any charity you choose. Carl, I need to do something to make amends. I can't just pretend none of this happened and move on with my life. That's exactly what you should do, move on. Find a new life somewhere else. This is my home too. My son lives here. My grandchildren I've never met. I can't just disappear. Grandchildren. Tommy had kids that Dale had never met because he'd been in prison for fraud. More consequences of his choices. Dale, your 2 minutes are up. Carl, I'm going to AA meetings 3 times a week. I'm working with a counselor about my gambling addiction. I'm trying to become the man I should have been all along. Good for you. Do it for yourself and your family, not for me. I'm doing it for everyone I hurt, including you. I walked away without saying goodbye. Let him stand there in the produce section, dealing with the stares and whispers from people who recognized us both. That evening, my phone rang. It was Ruth Patterson from the senior center. Carl, I got an interesting call today. Someone wants to make an anonymous donation to our fraud prevention program. $200 a month for as long as they're able to pay. I knew immediately who it was. Ruth, don't accept it. Carl, why not? We could really use the funding because it's not really anonymous and it's coming from someone whose money I don't want anything to do with. There was a pause. Oh, I see. Well, I'll let them know we can't accept their donation. But the next day, Ruth called back. Carl, this person is quite persistent. They called again and said they'd be happy to donate to any elder abuse prevention program in the state if we can't accept it. They seem very committed to supporting this cause. Dale was trying to force his way back into my life through my volunteer work, using guilt and manipulation, just like always. Ruth, if you want to give them the contact information for other programs, that's your choice. But I don't want his money anywhere near our center. A week later, I got a call from Margaret Foster, the woman whose nephew had stolen her retirement savings. Carl, something strange happened today. I got a check in the mail for $500 with a note saying it was a donation to help me rebuild my emergency fund. The return address just said a fellow victim of family fraud. My blood pressure spiked. Dale was now sending money directly to people from my support group. Margaret, don't cash that check. Why not? If someone wants to help, the donation is from someone who committed the same kind of fraud against me. He's trying to salve his conscience by giving away money, but it doesn't work that way. Oh my, that's complicated. Very complicated. Please tear up the check. But Dale didn't stop there. Over the next few months, I heard about mysterious donations to various people in my orbit. Tommy got money for his kids' college funds. Beverly's sister Margaret received a check to help with her husband's medical bills. Even Dr. Morrison, my counselor, told me someone had tried to pay for sessions for elder abuse victims. Dale was conducting a campaign of forced generosity, trying to buy his way back into everyone's good graces. It was manipulation disguised as charity, and it made me furious. Finally, I called him. Dale, stop sending money to people I know. Carl, I'm just trying to help people who need it. You're trying to manipulate your way back into my life. It's not going to work. That's not what I'm doing. I have money I can't spend on myself because I don't deserve it. So I'm giving it to people who actually need it. You don't get to decide who needs help. And you don't get to use charity as a way to force contact with my family and friends. Carl, I'll stop if that's what you want. But let me ask you something. If the money helps people, does it really matter where it comes from? Yes, it matters. Stolen money doesn't become clean just because you give it away. It's not stolen money anymore. I'm earning it at the warehouse. You wouldn't have that job if you hadn't stolen from me and gotten sent to prison. Everything in your life now exists because of what you did to me. I don't want any part of it. Dale was quiet for a moment. Carl, what can I do to earn your forgiveness? There has to be something. There's nothing, Dale. Some things can't be earned back. So I'm supposed to just give up? Accept that I destroyed the most important relationship in my life and there's no way to fix it. That's exactly what you're supposed to do. Live with the consequences of your choices. After I hung up, I realized something had shifted. For the first time since this whole nightmare began, I felt completely in control of the situation. Dale was the one asking for something now, and I was the one with the power to say no. 3 years have passed since Dale's release from prison. He sent me a letter every month, sometimes 2. I keep them all in a box in my bedroom closet, but I've only read a few. The ones I have read follow a similar pattern: acknowledgement of guilt, expressions of remorse, updates on his efforts to rebuild his life. He's been working steadily at the warehouse according to his letters, living in a small apartment, attending Gamblers Anonymous meetings, seeing a counselor twice a month. He sends me $200 every month, not because any court ordered it, but because he says it's the right thing to do. I put that money into a separate savings account. I'm not sure what I'll do with it eventually. Tommy visits me occasionally, usually around holidays or when he's passing through Des Moines for work. He's doing well, promoted to foreman at his construction company, bought a house, expecting his first child next spring. We don't talk about Dale much, but I can see the sadness in Tommy's eyes when the subject comes up. He asks about you. Tommy mentioned during his last visit in November. Wants to know how you're doing, if you're healthy, if the house is holding up okay. How do you answer? I tell him you're doing fine, that you're busy with your volunteer work and spending time with family. He always asks if I think there's any chance you'll forgive him someday. And what do you tell him? Tommy shrugged. I tell him I don't know. Some things take time to heal if they heal at all. The truth is, I'm not sure what forgiveness would even look like at this point. Dale caused real damage that goes beyond money. He changed how I see family relationships, how I trust people, how I view my own judgment. Even now, 7 years after discovering the truth, I sometimes catch myself being overly suspicious of well-meaning offers of help. Last month, my neighbor Pete Morrison offered to help me clean out my gutters before winter. My first instinct was to wonder what he wanted in return, what angle he might be working. That's not the man I used to be, and I resent Dale for turning me into someone who questions kind gestures from friends. But life has moved forward in positive ways too. My volunteer work has expanded beyond the monthly workshops. I now serve on the board of the Iowa Coalition Against Elder Abuse, helping to shape policy and educate law enforcement. We've successfully pushed for stronger penalties for family financial exploitation and better training for prosecutors handling these cases. The workshops themselves have grown into a regional program. We now have trained facilitators in 12 counties across Iowa, all using curriculum based on my experiences and those of other survivors. Detective Parker estimates that our prevention efforts have helped dozens of potential victims recognize warning signs before serious damage was done. Carl, you've probably prevented more elder abuse than any single person in Iowa. He told me at the Coalition's annual dinner last spring. That has to feel good. It does feel good, but but it also feels like an obligation. I lived through something that many people don't survive with their dignity intact. I was lucky enough to have resources, family support, legal help, the financial means to fight back. Not everyone has those advantages. Last week, I got a call from a woman in California whose brother-in-law had been stealing her Social Security checks for 2 years. She'd heard about my story through a podcast interview I'd done and wanted advice on how to proceed. "I'm 78 years old," she said. "My family thinks I should just let it go, not make waves. They say I'm too old to deal with the stress of a legal battle. Ma'am, what's your name? Dorothy Hoffman. Dorothy, let me ask you something. How do you think you'd feel if you let him get away with it? Angry, helpless, like I didn't matter." Then you have your answer. You matter. Your money matters. Your dignity matters. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. 3 months later, Dorothy called back to tell me her brother-in-law had been arrested and was facing federal charges. You were right, Carl. I matter. These conversations happen regularly now. People who've heard my story, read articles about the case, attended one of my workshops. They call or email looking for encouragement, for practical advice, for someone who understands what family betrayal feels like. I've thought about writing a book. Publishers have approached me, and there's certainly enough material for a full-length memoir, but I'm not sure I want to relive the whole experience in that much detail. The workshops and speaking engagements let me share the important lessons without dwelling on the painful specifics. My health has been good, knock on wood. I'm 67 now, still living independently in the same house Beverly and I shared. Roy wants me to consider moving to Portland to be closer to family, but this is home. Besides, my work is here, and I'm not ready to retire from fighting fraud. The house itself is in better shape than it's been in years. New roof, updated plumbing, fresh paint inside and out. I even had the kitchen remodeled last year, something Beverly always wanted but we could never afford. It feels like honoring her memory in a way that the fake medical bill payments never did. I still sleep on my side of the bed, still save her voicemails from before she got sick, still talk to her sometimes when I'm working in the garden she loved. But the grief has softened from sharp pain to gentle sadness, and I can remember our good times without being overwhelmed by loss. Emma, my granddaughter, graduated from college last spring with a degree in fine arts. She credits her success to the art supplies I bought her with the recovered money, though I think her talent and hard work deserve most of the credit. She's working as a graphic designer now and living in Chicago. We video call every Sunday, and she always shows me her latest projects. "Grandpa, you changed my life by fighting for what was right," she told me during our last call. "You showed me that standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. That might be the most important lesson to come out of this whole experience. Standing up for yourself, demanding justice, refusing to be a victim, these aren't selfish acts. They're necessary for maintaining dignity and protecting others who might be targeted next." Last month, I had an encounter that brought everything full circle. I was at the grocery store, the same one where I used to carefully count every dollar while sending Dale $800 a month, when I spotted a familiar figure in the pharmacy section. Dale was standing at the prescription counter, looking older and more frail than I remembered. He saw me at the same time I saw him. For a moment, we just stared at each other across the wide aisle, two old men with decades of shared history and an ocean of hurt between us. He looked like he was debating whether to approach me or quietly leave. I made the decision for both of us by walking over. "Hello, Dale, Carl." His voice was barely above a whisper. "You look good, healthy." "I'm doing well. How are you?" He gestured vaguely at the prescription bottles the pharmacist was bagging. Managing some health issues, high blood pressure, diabetes, prison food, and stress, I guess. We stood there in uncomfortable silence for a moment. Other shoppers moved around us, probably sensing the tension but not understanding its source. "Carl, I know you probably don't want to hear this, but I think about you every day. About what I did, about how I can never undo it. Dale, we've had this conversation. Not really, not face to face. Those phone calls, those letters, they're not the same as looking you in the eye and saying, 'I'm sorry.' I studied his face, looking for the manipulation and self-interest that had driven him for so many years. What I saw instead was genuine remorse mixed with something that looked like desperation. I heard about your volunteer work," he continued. "Helping other people who've been through what you went through, that's good. That's the kind of man you always were. The kind of man I always was, wouldn't have been fooled by fake medical bills for 8 years. The kind of man you always were, trusted family and wanted to do right by Beverly's memory. I exploited that trust. That's not your failing, Carl. It's mine." An elderly woman with a walker was trying to get to the pharmacy counter, and we were blocking her path. We moved aside, but neither of us left. Dale, what do you want? Really? I want my brother back. I know I don't deserve it. I know I probably can't ever have it. But that's what I want. I want to be invited to family gatherings again. I want to know my grandchildren. I want to sit around your kitchen table like we used to when we were kids, talking about baseball and complaining about the weather. Those days are gone, Dale. You made sure of that when you decided to steal from me. I know. But Carl, we're both getting older. I'm 62, you're 67. How many years do we have left to be angry at each other? I'm not angry anymore, Dale. I was angry for a long time, but I've moved past that. What I am is careful. Careful about trusting people who've proven they can't be trusted. So there's no path back, no way to rebuild even a small part of what we had. I thought about that question as we stood in the fluorescent lighting of the pharmacy section, surrounded by cough drops and blood pressure monitors. Was there a path back, and more importantly, did I want there to be one? Dale, you want to know the truth? The hardest part wasn't the money. The hardest part was realizing that the brother I thought I knew, the one I'd protected and helped and loved my whole life, was willing to watch me struggle and sacrifice while he lived comfortably off my pain. That person doesn't deserve my trust. You're right. That person doesn't deserve your trust. But Carl, I'm not that person anymore. Prison changes you. Losing your family changes you. Facing the reality of what you've done changes you. Maybe it does. But how would I know? How would I ever be able to tell the difference between genuine change and just another con job? Dale didn't have an answer for that, and we both knew it. Trust, once broken so completely, doesn't heal easily or quickly. Maybe it doesn't heal at all. I should go. Dale said finally. But Carl, I want you to know the $200 I send you every month, that's not about making myself feel better. That's about acknowledging my debt to you. Not just the money, but the years, the pain, the betrayal. I'll keep sending it as long as I'm able. You don't have to do that. Yes, I do. It's the only way I know how to show you that I understand what I took from you. After he left, I stood in that pharmacy section for several more minutes, thinking about forgiveness and family and the price of betrayal. A young pharmacist asked if I needed help with anything, and I realized I'd been standing there staring at nothing for quite a while. No, thank you, just thinking. The encounter left me unsettled for days, not because I was reconsidering my position. Dale had burned those bridges too thoroughly for them ever to be rebuilt, but because seeing him face to face reminded me that he was still my brother, despite everything. We shared the same childhood memories, the same parents, the same early experiences that shape who we become, but we'd made different choices as adults. I'd chosen honesty, responsibility, putting family first in healthy ways. Dale had chosen deception, exploitation, putting himself first regardless of the cost to others. Those choices had consequences that couldn't be undone by remorse or time or even genuine change. Dr. Morrison, my counselor, wasn't surprised when I told her about the grocery store encounter. How did it feel to see him? She asked during our session the following week. Sad, mostly. Sad for what we used to be, sad for what we'll never be again. Do you think he's genuinely changed? Probably. Prison and losing his family would change anyone. But Carl, genuine change doesn't erase the damage that was done. It doesn't create an obligation for you to trust him again. I know it's just hard to see someone you once loved become someone you have to protect yourself from. That's one of the cruelest aspects of family betrayal. It forces you to treat people you love as potential threats. Today marks exactly 8 years since I discovered Dale's theft. 8 years since that phone call from Judith Wright at the insurance company changed everything. I'm 67 now, and I can honestly say these have been some of the best years of my life, despite how they started. This morning I drove out to Beverly's grave to tell her about the latest success story from our fraud prevention workshops. A woman in Waterloo had recognized the warning signs when her stepson tried to convince her to let him help with her investments. She documented everything, called the police, and prevented what could have been a $40,000 theft. Another one saved Beverly, I said, sitting on the bench beside her beautiful granite headstone. You always said helping people was the most important thing we could do with our lives. The irony isn't lost on me that Dale's betrayal led to work that's probably more meaningful than anything I did during my 32 years at the plant. I've helped prevent dozens of financial crimes, supported hundreds of fraud victims, and changed state policy around elder abuse prosecution. None of that would have happened if Dale had been honest from the beginning. Last week, the Iowa Coalition Against Elder Abuse gave me their Lifetime Achievement Award. Standing at the podium in front of 200 people, prosecutors, police officers, social workers, victims advocates, I thought about how far I'd come from that broken man sitting in his kitchen with coffee spilled on the floor. When my brother stole from me, I told the audience he thought he was just taking money, but what he really did was give me a purpose. He showed me how vulnerable we all are to family exploitation, and he motivated me to do something about it. After the ceremony, a young prosecutor named Sarah Martinez, Lisa's daughter, as it turned out, came up to me. "Mr. Williams, I'm starting a new unit focused specifically on family financial crimes. Would you be willing to consult with us on training and victim support?" "Sarah, I'd be honored. The work continues to evolve. We're seeing more sophisticated scams now, often involving technology that older adults struggle to understand. Fake investment apps, cryptocurrency schemes, identity theft through social media. The methods change, but the psychology remains the same, minus criminals targeting people during vulnerable moments, exploiting trust and love and family connections. 2 months ago, I got a letter that surprised me. Not from Dale, those still come monthly, and I still save them unread, but from Tommy's new wife, Jessica. "Dear Uncle Carl," she wrote, "I wanted you to know that our baby was born healthy last month. We named him Carl Beverly Patterson, Carl for you, Beverly for the grandmother he'll never meet but whose memory means so much to our family. Tommy talks about you all the time, about how you stepped up to walk him down the aisle when his father couldn't be there, about how you taught him that doing the right thing matters more than keeping peace. I hope our son grows up to be half the man you are, little Carl Beverly." I cried reading that letter, sitting in my kitchen where this whole story began. Not tears of sadness, but tears of something like completion. Beverly's name would live on, connected to new life and new possibilities. I called Tommy that evening. "Congratulations on the baby, and thank you for the name choice. Uncle Carl, you've been more of a father to me than my biological father ever was. It felt right. Tommy, I want you to know what happened between me and Dale that's between us. It doesn't affect how I feel about you or your family, I know. And Uncle Carl? Dad knows about the baby's name. I told him. He said it was perfect, that you deserve to be honored that way." Even now, Dale was still trying to insert himself into family moments, still looking for ways to show he understood, that he'd changed, that he deserved consideration. But some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt with good intentions. The truth is, I rarely think about Dale anymore unless something reminds me of him. My life is too full of positive things, family relationships, meaningful work, financial security, good health. I've learned to live forward rather than backward, to focus on what I can build rather than what was torn down. This afternoon, I'm meeting with a group of law students who want to learn about elder fraud prosecution. Tonight, I'm having dinner with Roy and his family who are visiting from Portland. This weekend, I'm driving to Chicago to see Emma's latest art exhibition. These are the things that matter now, not the money Dale stole, though getting it back was important, but the life I've built in the aftermath of his betrayal. Not the brother I lost, but the family I still have and the purpose I discovered. If someone had told me 8 years ago that Dale's theft would lead to the most meaningful work of my life, I wouldn't have believed them. If they'd told me I'd be financially comfortable, emotionally healthy, and surrounded by people who respect what I've overcome, I'd have laughed. But that's exactly what happened. Dale thought he was taking advantage of a confused, grieving old man. Instead, he woke up something in me I didn't know existed, the willingness to fight for what's right. The courage to seek justice even when it's difficult, the strength to turn personal pain into public purpose. I'm 67 years old, and I'm living proof that you're never too old to fight back. You're never too old to demand justice. You're never too old to start over. You're never too old to discover that your worst moment can become the foundation for your best years. Tomorrow I've got another workshop at the Senior Center, another group of people who need to hear that they matter, that their dignity matters, that they don't have to accept being victims. I'll tell them my story not to dwell on the betrayal, but to show them what's possible when you refuse to stay down. At 67, I'm living proof that the best revenge is a life well lived. Dale took 8 years of my money, but I've had 8 years of purpose that I never would have found otherwise. That seems like a fair trade to me. Beverly would be proud. And that, in the end, is what matters most. When someone steals your money, they take your present, but when someone steals your trust during grief, they steal your ability to heal. The greatest victory isn't getting the money back. It's proving to yourself that you're stronger than their worst intentions. Family betrayal teaches you that blood doesn't guarantee loyalty, but surviving it teaches you that your own backbone is more reliable than anyone else's promises. At 67, I learned that the best inheritance you can leave isn't money. It's the courage to fight for what's right, no matter who's standing against you.